All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our You Ask, We Train session, Service Delivery Edition. My name is Mitchell Rollo. I'm a software training consultant here at ConnectWise. I help put together all the content you see on our university, such as our webinars, documentation, and lessons, and I focus mostly on the manage and sell products. And here joining me is
Hello, everybody. I'm Scott McQueenie, also a software training consultant here at ConnectWise. I focus on the Automate product as well. So, whereas any of your questions might be related to Automate, I'll try to do my best to handle those, and we'll see if we can get you guys taken care of.
perfect. So, Lisa was kind enough to send out a survey to all of those attending today to get your questions ahead of time. We've gone ahead, looked through those, have some answers prepared, but it'd be no fun if we only did the questions you gave us time to prepare on. So, also feel free to ask us questions on the spot, drop them in the chat, to pop on the mic, that's fine too. Let us know what you're thinking, what you want to know more about. Scott and I are here to answer your questions. So, without any further ado, let me go ahead and dive into one of those questions that was sent in ahead of time, or at least one of the topics that we had a couple questions come in on. One that we hear questions about all the time here at ConnectWise. Let me pull up those questions now. So we actually had a couple questions come in specifically around time. Not necessarily time entry, which is something I probably hear most often, but our questions today was more around, okay, now that my team is entering their time, how do I make sure that time is good to go? If we're tracking all of our time in the system, we need to make sure that time is actually looking good. And this typically involves some form of review process. You can see the two questions we have come up here. The first is, what is the quickest way to reject time entries and timesheets? So this person already knows mistakes are happening. They need a way to quickly highlight those for their team so the team can get them corrected so that time can eventually make it to invoicing. The other one, I've likely developed some terrible habits since our four-person business adopted manage. I appreciate the honesty there, especially around timesheet approval and expenses. Could you briefly walk through the typical way that customers are reviewing, approving, and processing timesheets, time entries for employees? So I wanted to kind of handle these two together because they are so closely related. And for that, I'm going to kind of walk through the process of what it looks like to actually review a timesheet once it has been submitted. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and pop into Manage over here. And for reviewing timesheets, you'll want to check out this My Approval screen under Time and Expense. For all the members in ConnectWise Manage that you are listed as their time or expense approver, whenever they submit those timesheets or those expenses, you'll see them pop up here for your approval. It's going to be under the Current Expenses, Current Timesheets section. In this case, I can already see that I have one timesheet pending approval. I can click in there and see what that timesheet is. And I'm not actually going to do this timesheet because it's a boring one. It has no time on it. So to go ahead and give us a little bit something more to work with, I'm going to move over to this missing timesheets section and find something with a timesheet with a lot of time on it. Gives us a little more information. All right, this one has 8 hours. Let me see if I can find something with a little bit more. Thought I saw one when I was looking here before the session. Right, here we go. We have a couple timesheets here, or time entries on this sheet at the very least. It gives us something to work with. Now, if your team is entering tickets all day, every day, they're going to see a much longer list here, and it might be hard for you to go ahead and review that right away, but I did want to call out something that you should be looking out for right on this screen, regardless of how many time or how much time is being entered. And that is any time entries listed here with a 0 on it. Whenever anyone has created a time entry for 0 minutes, well, that's usually a red flag. We'll go ahead and call it out for you on here. And let's see if I can go ahead and swap this into B0 just so you can see what that'll look like. That one's closed out. So yeah, you'll want to keep a lookout for those. And if you want to go ahead and start reviewing individual time entries, two easy ways to do that. First, you can either review day by day. So I can click into Wednesday here and see a list of all time entries for that day, go line by line reviewing each time entry. Things I'll want you to look out for on here. These are common mistakes that we see pop up on time entries. Time entry that's marked as non-billable that should be billable. The flag for that is going to be here in that billable column. The other big one is that time that is missing in agreement. So far, both my time entries are billable. That's good. That's what most of my technicians' time should be. However, one of these is missing in an agreement. I don't see anything listed right here. That's a problem for me. I'm going to want to go ahead and reach out to my team member to have them take a look at that. I can click into that time entry and I can reject the time entry that's a problem. This one that's missing an agreement, that's something my resource here, Jack, is going to need to correct. So I can go ahead and click reject, add a little note, missing agreement. That should be enough information for them to know what they need to fix. Perfect, this one's flagged as rejected. My job is not done yet. I want to go back to the timesheet now once I've reviewed everything and rejected all those various time entries. Now, this timesheet I'm looking is one of the ones that hasn't been submitted yet. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead and submit it in. And so look at one that has been submitted, just work with an example here. And if we need to, once we've rejected that, we can reject the time entry itself. These rejected timesheets will show up back under that resources timesheet. Now, one nice thing about this is they're not just going to be able to edit everything, so I don't have to review the entire timesheet again. The items that I have rejected are going to be called out in red, and those are going to be the only items that they can go in and fix to make that a little bit easier overall. All right, let me see if there are any questions on that. All right, you guys are awfully quiet in the chat. Like I said at the start, Scotty and I are here for you. So please ask questions if you have them. If you want clarification, if you want to see more detail, let me know. I don't mind diving in deeper on any of these. So with that one out of the way, let me go ahead and move on to our next question. So another question we saw come in was on ticket notifications. Our team gets emails when a ticket is created, but not when a ticket has been assigned to them. How can we make those messages deliverable? And this question is a little bit more complex than it seems because the answer is going to depend on exactly how these resources are being assigned. I'll kind of walk through what a couple of the most common scenarios are. If you have a centralized dispatcher, this could be someone you've hired just as a dispatcher, or maybe a service manager or a senior team member who just takes on the responsibility of dispatching new tickets. Either way, they're going to be assigning tickets out from the service board to other resources, and they're actually going to be automatically prompted to send an alert to that resource as they're assigning them. And I'll show you what that looks like in action. So I'm going to pull open my service board here. Let's pretend I am working as our dispatcher for the day. And I care about new tickets. And obviously I've been slacking. I've been slacking for the past several hundred days. I have a lot of new tickets I need to assign out. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of these. That's an installation ticket. It's 163 days old. It's about time we get this one assigned out to someone. Go ahead, open it up. I can read more information I want in the notes if I need to, but here's where I'll go ahead and assign a new resource. In this case, I'm going to assign Earl. He's an expert at these, and he can start working on this one later today, probably at 3. Half hour should be fine. Hit save, and I'm instantly prompted to send him an alert. If I want to type a message, I can. If I just want to alert him that he's been assigned, I can just click send here, and now he's going to be alerted, letting him know that, hey, you've been assigned to this ticket. And there's my little note indicating not only did I alert him, we can see in the ticket that I've sent him an alert as well. The only time you won't see that pop up fly up is if you're assigning yourself to a ticket. The reason being, you don't really need to send yourself an email. But that's not the only way resources are assigned to tickets. Another common one is through workflow rules. So workflow rules can be used to identify specific tickets on specific boards and then assign specific resources to them. By default, I don't believe there's going to be a notification attached, but we can use additional actions to really set up whatever way we want for those workflow rule actions to be. I can not only assign a resource, I can send an email at that same time. So if we can assign a resource with a workflow rule, we can always send a notification alongside. We'll just need to add an additional action on there. Uh, an alternative method is using email notifications for statuses. This is going to be used if we are updating the status every time we assign a resource. We can have that status linked to a notification that then sends to those assigned resources. And I'll show you what that looks like. Now, I will let you know that if you are sending alerts through a workflow rule or your dispatcher is typing up a notification, you probably don't want a status. At that point, you are probably going to start overwhelming your team members with essentially noise. They don't need to be notified several times they're being assigned. But if you're not doing those other two and you're just looking for another alternative, this is where status notifications can be handy. So do I have an assigned status on here? I don't, but I have a scheduled. So let's say we're using that scheduled status every time I assign a resource, and I'm going to want to add an email alert. Check this box here. I can choose who I'm going to be notifying. In this case, it is the assigned resources on the ticket, and then I can build out my notification with whatever information I want. This box right here allows me to parse specific information about the customer or the ticket and alert the resource with that additional bit of information. All right, did have another question come in. Not related to timesheets, I need a way to make sure the team adds a resolution note before closing the ticket. There's no way in Manage to force this. Reports sent to customers have an empty resolution field. What's my best recommendation? If this is something you're starting new, requiring a resolution on every ticket or something, or just a process that's not being followed consistently, it might be worthwhile for you to implement a two-step close process. Thing about timesheets is, depending on how often you're having them submitted, maybe weekly or bi-weekly or maybe even monthly, although I hope not, there's going to be a bit of a lag in between when the work is completed and when the time gets reviewed. And we don't want reports sent out during that lag period. So, implementing a two-step close process for service tickets allows your resources to mark tickets that they've finished work on, but not necessarily close the ticket yet. We can use this status to indicate that work has been completed. I think I have one set up in here. I do not, so I can show you how to set one up. Oh, here it is. I have a completed status that my resources will use to mark tickets as finished. You can see it's going to be marking the issue as resolved. This will go ahead and notify you as a service manager to go ahead and review the ticket. If it looks good to go, then you can close it out. This is a chance for you to review and see that that resolution is being added consistently. Like you mentioned, there's no way for us to enforce that this is being done every time, but we can build systems and processes in place to check and review to make sure this is being done consistently. So your resources would mark something as completed, it'd get reviewed, and then flip to a closed status after the fact. Another follow-up question. Is there a way of not allowing tickets to be completed if all tasks are not completed? Unfortunately, no. We can prevent tickets from being closed if all tasks have not been completed, but we can't prevent them from going to a completed status. To kind of show you what I'm talking about, let's have a ticket right here. Where's my tasks? Caps in there to let them know I'm serious. This task must be done. Dine. This task must be done every time. So I have this task on here. It's open. I have not completed it. If I wanted to change this ticket to a completed status, because this completed status is not closed, I'm going to be allowed to do that. However, if I'm going to were to change this to a closed status, now that I will be prevented from doing. So that went through without issue. Now if I try and do a closed one, I have an alert letting me know, hey, you have some open tasks. What do you want to do with these? I can either cancel, go back and finish up those tasks, which is what it's pre-selected. I can say, hey, you know what? I actually did close all those tasks. So this one's pre-selected. So if I hit OK, it will close out all those tasks for me. But as a resource, this is me now signing off that, yes, I did actually complete all those tasks. Third option, say, you know what? Those tasks weren't completed. I still need to do them, but they're not necessarily relevant to the ticket I'm working now. I can move them over to another separate issue. This does not pop up when you do a mass closing. Is that correct? Yes, this is only going to be happening when you're closing an individual ticket. We use ticket templates for certain ticket types that require a checklist to be checked before the ticket is closed. Yeah, absolutely. This is exactly what we'd want to use a task list for. And if those checks have not been checked off, your team members are going to be alerted, like I just showed, if they attempt to close a ticket ahead of time. All right. That I'm not seeing any more questions come in on this. That's fine. If you have more later, please feel free to jump in at any time. Let me go ahead and pull up another one of our pre-submitted questions now.
Mitchie, we
So,
did have
oh,
another follow-up question on that.
ooh, thank you for catching that. I minimized my screen probably 1 second too soon. Yes, the question is it the closed portion of the status that does the check? Absolutely. So just to kind of show a little more detail on that, let me go ahead and pull up the right screen. It's when I change the status to close, and on the setup table side, it is statuses that have the closed status checkbox selected. So any statuses that you have flagged as a closed status, those are the ones that are going to be doing the check. Thank you, Scotty.
Mm-hmm.
So we had two questions come in that were kind of related, so I grouped them together. And I also love alliteration, so I couldn't pass up titling this slide with some solid four-word alliteration. And the first question is how to improve communication on tickets with a customer. This is twofold. First is making sure that the customer is getting all relevant information by default. And this is going to be leveraging our closed loop time entry settings on the service board. And I'll show you what I mean right now. So still on the service board now, like I have been. And I'm going to go back over to the board tab, the main section. And that's going to be down here in this time entry and closed loop automatic email options. The term closed loop can be confusing. It's really our fancy phrase we use to describe the time entry process in Manage that does so much more than just enter time. Let me show you what I mean. We'll do both at the same time. All right. So when I'm entering a time entry, I'm not just entering time. I'm entering time on my timesheet. My notes that I enter here, these are added on my timesheet, accounting for what I did. They're also added to the ticket itself, creating a nice threaded documentation of every back and forth that's happened. And on top of that, for the time entry and the ticket notes, which we see here, I am also going to be hopefully emailing the customer. Now, this is something I don't like. Right now, my system is set up where this checkbox was not selected by default. And really, whenever my team members are working on tickets, whenever they have notes to enter in, updating what work they've done, I want that passed along to the customer because the customer also wants to know what's being done on their issue. So I want to make sure that this is selected by default so that my team members, when they're entering the notes, they're really having a more complex conversation than just entering their time. They are tracking what they did in their timesheet, tracking what they did on the ticket, and updating the customer with what they did all at the same time. Because the truth is, all three of those things need the same set of information. And I don't want to have to duplicate my effort, enter it once, twice, a third time. I want to enter it once and have it go to all three by default. So this one was pretty good. I had the time and the notes down, but right now my system was set up where my contact was not being notified. But that's a quick fix. Jumping back over here to my service board, the time entry option right here. This is where my notes are being added. This is say, hey, when I enter time, I want to make sure my time notes are added to the ticket, in this case, a discussion. Over here is where I turn on the time entry rather than just a blank notes box. And down here is where I say, I want to go ahead and automatically notify someone on the ticket whenever I am entering that update. So now my contact will be notified by default every time I enter on notes on a ticket. Obviously, my technicians can opt out of that. There are going to be scenarios where they need to enter time without updating the client. That's fine, but that needs to be the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. And now my service board reflects that. That is half of our first question, which is how to improve communication on tickets with customers. The other half is using status notifications wisely. Now, I showed these off with the last, or not last question, but one of our previous questions, with the caveat that I want to make sure we are not over loading our technicians. We don't want to bombard them with so many notifications that it becomes noise. The same is true for our customers. We want to make sure that we're only using notifications where it makes sense. And right now, I'd say I'm actually dropping the ball a little bit. I have a little bit less notifications set up than I'd normally like. I can see on my notification steps right here, I only have one notification, and this one is only going to a specific internal member. So right now, none of my notifications are actually going to the customers. As a standard, I typically see partners at the bare minimum do every new status alerts the customer that, hey, I've received your issue. It's just a great way to give your customer some peace of mind that I know I sent my issue in and I know my service provider got it. The other is the close status. That way, every time a ticket is closed on your board, the customer is alerted of that closure. Now, there's going to be a lot of steps in between there. Some of them, it may be relevant for you to add a status notification. Just be cautious when you do and be deliberate. Don't add a status notification to every status. I promise you, your customers don't care. The only thing you'll achieve is your customers tuning out all of your notifications, which defeats the purpose. So just make sure you are being deliberate when you're using status notifications. Those are my two tips for kind of improving communication with customers on tickets themselves.
Caw.
Oh, yes, Scotty?
We did have one follow-up when you were going in and showing the closed loop. The question here is, that pertains to discussion and resolution only, correct? Not for internal, for customer updates?
Yes. So that's a good question. And this is an instance where manage does what you'd hope it would do. So let me pop up in my ticket right here. As you can see, I wasn't emailing the contact. I'm going to save that. Cancel. I don't actually want to close it. We will leave this one open. There. All right. So I have this in progress ticket. It's great. Set to email the contact. Right now, if I were to go to add a discussion note, new note, start fresh, and you can see I'm ready to add a new note right here. It's because I already had this open. Try this again, save it. Good. Now when I pop this up, that contact should be selected by default. Why aren't you being selected? Why are you being difficult for me? Well, as you can see on the internal side, the flip side I wanted to show you is that I have set it up so my internal, I don't have time entries at all, so I can't even send notifications through here if I want to. So I can go ahead and say, oh, well, these are some internal notes, type whatever I want. Necessarily want to tell the customer that, but maybe I need to alert someone that I wasn't able to fix the problem. I've added it as an internal note in the system. Not only is this logged in the system and I didn't alert the customer, if I were to send an email out later, all of these internal notes are excluded. Only the discussion and only the resolution are going to be included on that email that gets sent out. Can you turn off customer notification per ticket? Yes. And that's what this checkbox down here is for. So if I want to make sure someone's not notified, I can save that. And now I want to go and enter a new time entry. It'll be deselected by default for all new time entries for this ticket. So yeah, now you can set the overall default in the service board. That default is applied to every ticket that gets created on that board. So from then on, all of your new time entries will have the contact selected by default. You can deselect specific tickets, as I've done right here, and now new time entries for this customer will not be selected by default. Or you can even deselect it on a one-off on an individual time entry. So a lot of flexibility with exactly when you want that selected and not selected. All right. The second half of this, the somewhat related question I heard come in is, how do I format an email template so it shows up properly in Outlook when the client or I receive the ticket notification? And I am not an HTML expert, but I have some on our team and they've helped me out with this one. And unfortunately, this question is more complicated than it sounds. It assumes and implies that simply Outlook itself will be the same, let alone all email clients. And the fact is, that is not the case. Even within Outlook itself, if you're using Outlook on a laptop versus Outlook on a mobile device, it will and can display your emails differently. So there's not a shortcut answer here to say this is what you need to do every single time for your email templates. But with that in mind, our HTML experts on our team were handy enough to put together a documentation page on our university that walks through their tips and tricks for working not just with Outlook, but keeping all different email providers in mind and different tools that your customers may be using to look at your emails to make sure that they are going to be looking consistently great across the board. Let me grab that and share it with everyone. One second. There you guys go. There's the documentation page we have in the university that talks through all the best tips and tricks on how to get your emails displaying consistently across the board. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Feel free to take a look at that at your leisure and drop any other questions to me as you want. Let's see what other pre-canned questions we had. So this one is somewhat related to the process we talked about earlier with reviewing tickets, but I did want to call it out. Uh, I generally review time entries on most all managed service tickets from my team once they go to completed status. However, this becomes tedious if there are a lot of time entries that need to be modified. If we're finding not just a single problem here or there, but a systemic problem, something on the back end that was set the wrong way that's causing a lot of missed information or incorrect information in the board, it can be difficult to update them all at once. Unfortunately, on the time entry side, we do not have any mass actions. I did want to call out our enhancement forms for those of you that have not used them before. Go ahead and show you where they can be found. It can either be connectwise.com/enhancement or over here on the university. And this is a tool that we have put together for our partners to let us know what features they want to see. And not only request features, but vote on them as well. So our product management can see not only what people want, but what is most popular. So this can help determine what features get added to manage in the future. Now, that's not the only reason I wanted to touch on this question, because this question to me, reveals a larger issue than an inability to mass update time entries. This question tells me that my review process is found or has found one of those systemic problems I mentioned. And this is one of the most valuable pieces of having a review process, not only to make sure information looks good that's leaving my business, but so we can identify and track these different trends. If I'm seeing time entries that are a whole bunch of time entries that are missing an agreement, or a whole bunch of time entries that were entered with the wrong work type, this likely means that I have a default somewhere that's coming from the wrong place, and this is something that I'll want to correct going forward. So definitely use instances like this where you are seeing trends during your review process. Use that to better your process itself. Find out what's triggering this disconnect in the first place, and add a default or a workflow rule or a setting change to make sure that this is corrected going forward. A common one here, like I mentioned, would be those work roles or work types. Let's say I'm seeing all of my work types on time entries coming in incorrect. Well, I probably have a bad default setup somewhere. In that case, I want to come back to likely my service board. However, these work types can be defaulted elsewhere, and set up a default work type to start applying. In this case, I know on my help desk board, 95% of all work done on my help desk board is remote. Well, if it's going to be that consistent, I want that remote work type applied as the rule. And if there are any exceptions, such as someone having to go on site or someone working on the weekend instead of in normal office hours, that's when we should flip over the work type. But I want the remote to be the default, since that is the most consistently used work type on this specific board. And look for instances like that where we can go ahead and start saving effort by making whatever the standard mode is, make it the default going forward. Can you explain the agreement work role and work type on the agreement? Absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about because, in my opinion, it is both one of the most powerful features within ConnectWise Manage and one of the most confusing, which is a bit of a double-edged sword at that point. So I'll start on the agreement screen, but these work roles and work types can be set multiple places. So first, a quick introduction to what work role and work type are, because it's not necessarily obvious if you're brand new to Manage. Work role and work type are the two fields we use to describe how we're spending our time and how much we should bill for that time. That's the kind of most basic explanation. Um, the work role represents who is doing the work. What is their role in your organization? You can see my work roles up here. They're on the sales team, they're a technician, they're a developer, they're a consultant. What are the different roles in your organization? And those are going to be the different work roles that you'll be using throughout Manage. This is going to be determining the base rate of their time. Whatever my base rate I'm charging for. Is it 40 an hour, 100 an hour, 200 an hour, whatever that base rate is. Work type then describes how that person is spending their time. Are they working remotely? Are they working on site? Did they have to travel somewhere? That travel time needs to be tracked. Are they working after hours? Are they working over the weekend? That's an important distinction because I might bill for that after hours or weekend work differently than my normal in office time. So, whenever you have a different distinction on how you would bill for that time, that is when you should create a different work type to represent that different distinction. These work types then, these alter that base billing rate by either completely overriding it with a custom rate, giving it a multiplier, so just as billing for time and a half over the weekend versus the regular rate during office hours, or it can be flagged whether something is billable or not billable. And a step further, which is what's happening right here, we can flag what time entries are and are not covered under contract. In this case, in fact, I'd probably want this to be the reverse. All my this contract, let's say it's pretty limited. This contract will only cover work done by technicians and only if it is done remotely. This is what I'd call a very specific agreement that covers work in a very specific case. Any time entries could then be applied to this agreement, but only technician time done remotely, work role, work type, will be covered. If I wanted it more complex, let's say I don't care who does the work, but it does still need to be remote. That's what this would look like. Now, regardless of who's doing the work, as long as it's being done remotely, that is going to be covered. However, if a consultant ever had to go on site, because one of them is not covered, the time entry is not covered. But wait, there's more. Because we're talking about agreements, oftentimes, since the agreement represents the contract with the customer, it doesn't only determine when work is and is not covered, it often determines any special rates or discounts the customer might have. And that's why you see the work roles and work types tabs up here. So let's take this on-site type, for example. I'm only going to cover work I do for them remotely, but you know what? Because they have this contract with me, let me go ahead and save. When I send someone on site, I am going to bill them, but because of their contract with me, I'll cut them a deal. They're going to get a discount on that on-site work. So I'm going to set up a custom work type here with a multiplier of instead of 1.9, boom. Now, automatically, as my team enters time against this contract, not only is it automatically determining when something is and is not covered by the contract, it's also going to be determining how much to bill for it based on their contract that they've signed with me. All right, so you had a follow-up question, and that is exactly the next step here. Now that this agreement is all set up and good to go, what does this mean when it comes to actually entering time on a ticket? All right, since I've been messing with this one a bunch, let's go ahead and try something different. Looks like someone on my sales team sold a new laptop. I'm gonna have to set it up for them so we can deliver it out. So if I were to come in here, click new note to start a time entry, I would write all my notes in here, hold the new thing, caps lock still on, that's fine. And from here, I can see that my work role, I'm a technician doing the work. My work type, in this case, I just have a regular work type in the system that describes how my team typically spends their time. This is going to be determining the billing rate for the item, which we'll see once we save it. Let's say this took me 3 hours to do. It is applied to a specific agreement. Let's save. And now that I've saved this time entry, as a technician, I don't really need to worry about the agreement as long as it's entered. If my agreement is applied, I don't need to worry. Is this covered? Is this not covered? How much should this be billing for? Should this be billable? Should this be non-billable? Your technicians don't want to be making billing decisions. You probably don't want them making billing decisions. But as a technician, I can say, okay, this is the customer. This is their agreement with us. I'll make sure that's applied. The agreement will determine what to do with the time. I'll just make sure the time is associated. And as far as the billing it rate, I didn't have to do that at all. I simply had my work role and work type selected, and my billing rate ended up being 125 for me. And here is actually telling me why. My work role of regular technician has a base rate of 125, and my regular work type, well, that has a multiplier of 1. So it's just going to say, keep the base rate, don't make any changes. That's where my 125 is coming from. On the agreement side of things, let me go ahead and find that now. We can go ahead and see whether this time entry is going to be covered or not covered, and what we're going to be doing with that. So here's that agreement. We have technician covered, good, regular covered, good. That tells me this time entry will probably be covered, but we can double check this time tab and see for sure. And it actually looks like this was not covered. Okay, that's interesting. This app hours column tells me how many of my hours are covered. I entered 3, we covered 0. Let's find out why. That's what this app hours info column is for. Right, looks good there. Why are we not covering? Is my agreement still active? Active, monthly. Oh, I see what happened. All right. So this agreement only covers incidents instead of time entries. I admit I picked one of the worst agreement examples I could use because there's approximately 0.01% of our partners that do incident-based agreements. What most of you and probably everyone on this call is doing is using an hours-based agreement. So let me find a better agreement example.
You did that on purpose so you could show them that example.
I'm going to be honest, I avoid talking about instant-based agreements whenever I can because there is a very, very rare case where it's going to be your best course of action. All right, let's see if we can flip this over to a different agreement instead. Perfect. Let's do user care instead. Change that on the ticket. Also want to change it on the time entry. Changing it on the ticket is only going to change it for all new time entries going forward. Managed care, it's fine. Should be a much more normal agreement for our example. There we go. Hours unlimited. So this time, this agreement is going to be covering time entries themselves, which is what I want. And here I can see, still not covered. Let me go ahead and update it now since I made some changes. And now when it's not covered, I should be able to see why. I think this is a follow-up while this does its update. I think this is a follow-up to the question we had earlier on the resolution, and that is, how do I ensure the system reminds them to check the resolution checkbox? Unfortunately, we don't have any piece of automation in there to go ahead and check to see if that is being entered. All right, so this one is still not being covered, but now I can see why. And it looks like it is because was a fixed fee ticket I was working on. Fixed fee tickets are going to be billing outside of the normal hours. We're saying, I don't care how much time I entered on this. I want to bill for this ticket at a specific rate. If I say, no, 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 that's not right. This actually should be covered under the contract. This app hours info column tells me exactly what I need to change to make sure it is covered going forward. I wanted to walk through this process because, and this is why I didn't prepare one ahead of time, because if you are setting up agreements for the first time, you are going to run into scenarios where you expect something to be covered and it's not. And this app hours info column is the perfect tool you have. It tells you exactly what you need to check to go ahead and get that fixed. So in this case, because my ticket was fixed fee and it didn't need to be, see, Scotty, I can rhyme too. I'll change this over to actual rates. Then I'll want to head back over to my agreement. Head to my time entries. Go ahead and update my rates and allocations. It said, yes, go ahead and check if you should cover it again. I made a change. It's going to check it now. And now I should see this app hours column, say 3, to indicate that it is now covered.
While that's processing, Mitchie, kind of to you guys in the audience, I would be similar to a lot of you guys if you're asking questions about manage, because I am an automates me. So I don't know a lot of these things about manage. We've already established, Mitchie, that one solution for getting the tickets that don't have the resolution populated is like a 2-stage close, where I'm going to have Mitchie be my ticket reviewer and he's going to kick it back to the technician and member and say, hey, you didn't put a resolution in here. Would that sort of functionality be capable within a woofer rule? Where I said, all right, I've got a machine, I got a ticket that got marked to some sort of status that is a closed status, but doesn't have a resolution. So then take action, like maybe notify the member or the resource or something like that.
Unfortunately not. So where that information on the resolution is going to be stored is in a rather vague notes pot. So this is just where all the notes are collected. It's not a simple flag or field that the workflow rule can then check for, since it's all kind of grouped together in the one notes section.
Okay.
So I'm not seeing any new questions come in. I've done, oh, I lied. One just came in. You care mostly about the resolution on your recurring tickets. You use a SQL query to pull that data and report on it. For those of you that don't want to use SQL, you can report on whether or not the resolution is there within Manage itself. Let me go ahead and see if I can find that report. The only thing that we can't do is have an automation check for that and alert for its absence. But we can definitely pull up reports that can be reviewed and see when it is and is not being done. It's going to be under the Service Desk Service Reports section. And which one of these reports is it? That's the problem. Manage has over 130 reports. I know one of them has what I want. It's not always easy for me to remember exactly which one. Does one of these reference the summary or resolution? That one does, but it's not the one I'm looking for. I believe it is the service ticket list. I could run it, but I know my data in my system is not perfect. But I know we also have all of these on our this one has the discussion. While I see if I can track down that report, Scotty, would you mind taking over a bit and answering one of our automate questions that came in ahead of time?
All right. So one of the questions we had was pertaining to the network probe. The question was asking, what are some best practices for the network probe? As we've heard contradictory advice from ConnectWise over the past few years. So I've got a couple of answers to this. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. So give me just a moment here. Okay. I'm going to attempt to share. I'm going to be sharing my other screen. So what I've done is I've gone to our university here. This question was about best practices for the network probe. And I know that I have been involved in a couple of different assets that we created that might kind of point you down the right path about using our network probe. So I'm starting off by going to our university, and then I'm going to go to our education and video library. Now I happen to know that these assets I made were webinars, but let's say you don't know that. Let's say you just want to search for the asset. So I've gone to Education and Video Library. I'm going to search on Automate. So in my case, I could leave the video type deselected. That way I'm going to say, I don't care if it's a how-to or a webinar. I just want to find the assets. And now I'm selecting to expand my categories, and I will choose Network Probe and SNMP. So this has resulted in me seeing every asset that we have in our video library related to the Network Probe. For my particular example, I know that the ones I made were webinars, so I will filter that even further still. And I've got two particular assets I'd like to point out to attempt to answer this question. We're talking about best practice for using the Automate probes. Well, I would point you to Introduction to Network Probe Gen 2. We call it Gen 2 because we did actually rewrite and refactor the network probe. We made a lot of your interface for the network probe now being managed through our WCC3 Web Control Center. That's in our Gen 2 probe. So watching that video will just kind of introduce you to how to find machines that are or are not a probe, how to enable a machine to be a probe, and how to manage those settings in the web and get it to look for what you want it to do. For the network probe, we want it to scan for IP addresses, devices on its subnet. There might be some we want to exclude. So I'm making those settings, including other things like community strings for SNMP. Those are all things that are kind of talked about in this introduction to the Network Probe Gen 2. The other half of this, and this is sort of the other half of probe functionality, and when the question states that we've received contradictory advice from ConnectWise resources over the past, I suspect we're leaning more towards the second half, which is agent deployment best practices. We have focused this webinar still in the Gen 2 version of the Network Probe, the one that is managed through our WCC3 Web Control Center. Well, we talk about the best practices for agent deployment in that video. And if there's confusion around that, if you've heard contradictory advice, it might be related to some of the best practices for agent deployment. There are some settings, there are some configurations you need to do to maximize the success of agent deployment. And so those sorts of things are addressed in that particular webinar for agent deployment. There are less things where I would expect contradictory advice for the just functionality of the probe as far as discovering machines and being able to scan the networks and exclude the IP addresses we don't want, because those things are pretty straightforward. I wouldn't expect colleagues within ConnectWise to be giving you different pieces of advice on that, but for the agent deployment, for sure. So that was just coming to our education and video library, and I'm just filtering on Automate. I filtered on the Automate category by clicking here to make it the probe, and then I filtered it down even further for the webinar. If you're looking for a quicker, shorter solution, of course, I could always make sure how-to videos are checked and then maybe look at some of these. Here's another example, which is how to review the agent readiness check. What we're talking about there is I have just enabled the network probe. I want to know if I am going to be successful attempting to deploy agents with it. So this is one of the things that might have been, a scenario where you got different advice from different colleagues here at ConnectWise. Well, this video talks about how to review the agent readiness check, and that's part of the process. I'm trying to determine if it's ready. Well, maybe I don't need to watch the entire webinar. I'll just watch this one how-to video, and that'll maybe point me down the right direction. So that was one of the questions that came in.
Yeah, so that was my question. Do you mind if I just quickly ask a follow-up?
Oh, by all means.
Thank you. Yeah, so the question really came around. We've been told point blank by both our onboarding technician and ConnectWise support that the probe's kind of a deprecated way of doing things and don't really worry about it anymore. But what you're saying is that is definitely not the case.
When they said deprecated way of doing things, which part of the probe functionality were they speaking to?
They basically said don't worry about the probe at all. It doesn't really do very much. You don't need it.
Okay. I disagree with that, and it is not deprecated. So the probe has two primary functions. interacting with network devices. And that is literally, I've enabled a probe of this machine, on a machine at this location. And a key tenet of Automate is that Automate always expects and sort of requires that every computer and device within a location can talk to each other. So if you've got an environment, an example that we've used for years here is back in our old building, back when the company was LabTech, we had our developers in one VLAN, and they really couldn't see machines on my VLAN that myself and the rest of our colleagues were on. So effectively, those were two separate networks, and as such, in Automate, those would need to be segregated into two separate locations because Automate expects every computer within a location can talk to every other computer. And to that end, when I make a machine a network probe, Automate is going to check to see, do I already have a network probe enabled at that location? And if I don't, it'll let me do it. If I do, it'll say, you've already got a probe in the location. Do you want to move it to this machine? So now I've enabled a probe. The first sort of functionality for the probe is to scan the network and look for network devices. Automate, of course, does a very good job working with computers on which I can install the Automate agent. I'm very good at managing Windows desktops, laptops, servers, pulling information from them, sending commands to them. Automate is very strong on interacting with its agent, but I cannot install an agent on a network device. So part of what my client is asking for is I need to know what devices are on the network. I want to be able to interact with some of them. I want to be able to do some monitoring with them, maybe collect some data from them. So that's where our probe comes in. When you enable the probe, it is going to automatically attempt to scan all of the IP addresses in its own subnet range. I can add other subnets if I know that machine has access to other subnets, and I can exclude some IP addresses. Perhaps I've got an IP address block of 50 IP addresses that are VoIP phones. They're dumb devices. They're not SNMP enabled. I don't perceive any benefit for them showing up in Automate because I cannot monitor anything from them in Automate. So maybe I'm making a choice to exclude them. But the probe still does a very good job of scanning the network to find connected devices. In there, maybe I'm going to find connected devices on the network that I need to manage for this client. It could be all sorts of things, hubs, switches, printers, any sort of connected device. So I can see them, I can interact with them, I can turn on an alert to see if they seem to be down and no longer connected for a moment. And then I can take a lot of other action if they are SNMP enabled. We can collect data from them. We can find stuff related to specific OIDs and perhaps alert. So I have a lot of functionality available to me just to be able to see network devices on the client network on which I cannot install an agent. And then the sort of, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, because that's a key part of it, because one of the things that I've been working on is around the SNMP monitoring of access points and things. And certainly SNMP monitoring was something that we were quite clearly told didn't work very well, and it's not really worth worrying about. So
Okay.
I'm hearing quite a what I'm hearing is what I want to hear. So
Okay.
which is good. Now, obviously, we have a lot of networks where they have no centralized, where it's all remote. Obviously, that presents a different challenge. But yeah, I mean, what I wanted to know is it's worth investing my team's time and making sure our probes are all set up, configured, and working. And I'm clearly hearing a yes on that. So,
okay, so I'll expand a little bit further. I don't know who might have told you that it's not very reliable for SNMP. I've talked to a lot of partners over the years, and I've talked to partners that have come from other RMM solutions. I've talked to partners that have used things like Auvik and other tools that with which Automate integrates. Yes, a lot of the other RMM tools, yes, things like Auvik, which is an SNMP tool, do a better job at SNMP. Absolutely, Automate's great. Add the Automate agent on a Windows machine. It is not great at SNMP, but it 100% works. It needs to be able to talk to the device. You need to have the appropriate community string set up to be able to talk to the device. And then if you want to do things like SNMP monitoring, a real, sort of the most effective way from the probe standpoint to do SNMP monitoring is to find the OID you're looking for and set it up on a collection template to where you could say, if I see this OID and it is above or below this threshold, then I can fire off an alert. That is the sort of most scalable SNMP monitoring way to handle something for a device that the probe has detected. I can do one-off SNMP monitors, but that's not scalable. I would have to create one for each device. So
yeah, so we put Sophos firewalls everywhere, so we could create a monitor for Sophos firewalls. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much. That very much answers my question.
Very good. Thank you. I'm glad to
Appreciate
hear that. Okay, I had another one here that had come in from our preloaded questions as well, Mitchie. This was, is it possible to download agents inside of Automate without using the web? And the answer to that is nope. The way to gain access to the Automate agent installers is only through the Web Control Center. That's the way it is, and I don't think that's ever going to change.
Thank you, Scotty. While you were answering that question, with the help of one of our attendees, Randa here, I was able to track down that report I was looking for. Just wanted to show it off to everyone really quick. So it was the company service report right here. And click on this little help icon, takes you straight to the documentation. And here's what that's going to look like. This is if you wanted to get a list of all your tickets just to see whether they do or do not have a resolution attached. This is the easiest way to do that. And here I can see I'm pretty consistent on it. We had one resolution, but looks like the other tickets that are in the top section of this report right here were missing that. So this is a very quick and easy way to find tickets that do and don't have that resolution. And as you can see, you have a lot of parameters up here you can filter down to find a specific board, specific customer, date range, whatever you want to filter by. All right. So let me go ahead and see what other questions we had come in since we still have about a half hour left. Ooh, excellent. Something I really enjoy talking about, and that is SLAs. What is the best way to pause the SLA timer when needing to delay the start of a ticket? For example, a user is leaving in 2 weeks and the ticket is submitted immediately by the customer. So they've contacted you about an issue 2 weeks ahead of time. Very kind of them to give you a bit of a warning, but this can present a bit of a tricky situation for your SLAs. You don't want to be have that SLA ticking for those entire 2 weeks while you await the scheduled time to go ahead and do this work. So what you'll need to do in this instance is leverage a ticket status that is using a "we are waiting" escalation status. And I'll show you exactly what that is and how to set that up. So if I pop back over to, don't have my service board up anymore. I don't. I'll reload it again. Hop into my system setup tables and head back into somewhere we've been a couple times already, the service board setup table. And we'll work on that help desk again and move over to our statuses. Now you can build as many diverse statuses as you want in your system. Doesn't matter how many you have. At the end of the day, there are only going to be a very small handful of escalation statuses that correlate to. And you can actually see all those listed right here. These are going to be 5 different escalation statuses that correlate to the different states a ticket can be in. You can have met 0 of the 3 SLA goals, which is going to be this: we have not responded. You could meet the first SLA goal, respond, which is we have responded. You could meet the second goal, we have created a plan, or you could meet the third and final, we have resolved an issue. It's kind of going to move up a little 3-tiered staircase. I mentioned there were 5. You guys can see the 5th one on here for a couple different statuses, which is we are waiting, do not escalate. Those first 4 I mentioned are used to track where in that little tiered process we are, which of those escalation goals we have or have not met. This 5th one is used as that pause. We can go ahead and flip any ticket to a status that has a "we are waiting, do not escalate" status, and this will go ahead and put a pause on all 3 of those SLA timers. And that pause will stay in place until the status changes again to another status that is not in a waiting status. So this probably answers half of your question, or if it does answer your question fully, you probably have a follow-up, which is, okay, that's how we pause the timer for those 2 weeks, but how do I make sure my timer starts ticking again automatically on that 2 weeks later? This is where workflow rules are going to come into play. We can use workflow rules in this instance to automate restarting up that timer at the scheduled date. So first I'll show you what this looks like on a ticket to set this up, and then I'll show you what we do in the workflow rule side to kind of close it out to start that timer running again. So first I'm going to go ahead and head back over to my service board and pull open a ticket. Server's down, since it's probably a high priority. And right now, low priority, so that's not right. Let's go ahead and bump it up to my critical priority here, since we're serious about this. And obviously my SLAs have been running for this one for a little longer than I'd like, but let's go ahead and say I now need to pause and flip this over to a waiting. In this instance, because I'm scheduling workout in advance that I want to go ahead and pause for, I might want to have a separate status from waiting, since I probably have some automation around a waiting status already. So let's say I wanted to use a scheduled status instead, since I'm scheduling work. And then I would go ahead and schedule the work that needs to be done for 2 weeks from now. In that case, July 8th. Perfect. It's scheduled on my calendar. Good to go. Actually, I could do myself one better. Let's go ahead and schedule it for a specific time, because I know if I just schedule it for a day, I'm likely to forget. All right, good. This is in place, but we're not quite set yet, because now my timer is paused, but I needed to make sure that it unpauses. So for this, we'll head over to the workflow rules setup table now. And this is where the backbone of automation in ConnectWise Manage is going to be coming from. And I know I don't have a workflow rule for this yet, so I'll create one. Let's see. Scheduled ticket status. Change to in progress. I always recommend giving your workflow rules a specific name so you know exactly what they're for. So this is service tickets. And because I'm going to be working with specific ticket statuses on this workflow rule, I need to make sure I have a service board selected, or otherwise I won't be able to interact with the specific statuses I care about. Since these tickets are on my help desk board, I make sure that's selected. For my event now, I need to find tickets that are in this scheduled status. So ticket is in value status. Scheduled. Good. But I don't want all my scheduled tickets. I only want tickets that are in a scheduled status for that date they're scheduled to begin working. So I need to make this a little more complicated. So it's tickets in a scheduled status. And for my second event, and I think there is, that's not the one. Not currently. There we go. Next open schedule record is 0 days away. Now I'm looking for tickets that are in a scheduled status, and the next scheduled record is scheduled for today. So now it's automatically going to start ticking again on that day. My workflow rule will find it that on the day of, flip it to the correct status, and then we will be underway. Yeah, and this process is going to work the exact same way. Someone else chimed in. If a ticket is on hold for a customer, the same is going to be true if it's on hold for a vendor. If that's another instance where you want to pause your SLA timers, just go ahead and make sure you use tickets that are in a status with a "we are waiting" escalation status. All right, I see someone typing. I'll give you a chance to finish that question. Oh, I got myself carried away. What status does it get changed to? Nothing yet. This is just the first half of my workflow, which is the event. What am I looking for? The second half is the action. What am I going to do about it? In this case, I want to change the ticket status. Which status do I want? I can pick any of them I want. In this case, I'd like to use in progress. On the day of, we're supposed to do work. It's in progress as far as I'm concerned. Hit save. Now it's ready to go. I want to make sure that this is not happening just once in case this needs to get rescheduled multiple times. It's going to be going continuously. and it's going to check every day. And once this is all good to go and I want to turn it on and kick it into gear, I can use this activate now button up here. And again, I'm going to have it checking every day. And maybe I don't want it worrying on the weekends, just my office hours. Perfect. Now my workflow event is set up what to look for, action is set up what to do, and my run schedule is set up how often is it checking, in this case, daily. A pro tip for all of you that I skipped over, but I want to call out. If any of you are new to using workflow rules, do not turn your workflow rules on like I just did until you use this test button. This test button right here is what's going to show you in advance what your workflow rule is going to be working on. So in this case, I don't have any tickets that are currently in this scenario. That's fine. That's probably what I was hoping for. I shouldn't have 100 tickets in the scheduled status. Always do this though, because it's easy to overlook something. I have a story. I was trying to set up our service boards internally for our education team, and I wanted every ticket that had been replied to by a customer changed to a different status. I thought this is a no-brainer. I'm really good at workflow rules. I'll handle this easy. And I overlooked something. It was possible for tickets to be closed, but still flagged as updated by a customer. So I conveniently reopened about 150 tickets after we closed for the day on our education board, which gave my manager a brief heart attack. All right, so another question coming, one that I totally understand because it's not obvious. Can I explain the difference between the run schedule and the event schedule? Absolutely. The two are going to work hand in hand. One tells you how often to carry out that action. The other half tells you how often to check for that action. And at first glance, you just said the same thing twice. Not quite. There's a key difference. Let's say you have tickets that are in a new status, or let's say it's in an in progress status, and it's been in progress for 2 hours, which is too long for you. If it's been in progress for 2 hours, it needs to be assigned. Or it's a new ticket. It's been in a new status for 2 hours. If a ticket's in a new status for 2 hours, someone should have updated it and changed the status by now. Yeah, you're right. And we don't want to wait every 2 hours to check for that because it could be every 10 minutes a new ticket has had that happen to them. So we'll want to make sure we set up our workflow rule to do is to check every 10 minutes to see if there are any tickets that meet that criteria. So every 10 minutes, we're checking to see, are there any tickets that have been in a new status for 2 hours? But what we don't want to do is send an email for the same 2 hour old ticket at 2 hours, at 2 hours and 10 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's not useful. So what we want to do is set up a workflow rule that's checking for new tickets every 10 minutes, but only alerting, say, every hour or every 2 hours on tickets that it already found the previous time. So that's what we're going to be using the run schedule and the event schedule to do. So this section down here, the check the event on each record, this is how often we're checking. So in that scenario, here's where I'd say, all right, here we want to go ahead and check every 10 minutes. Now up here, how often are we actually going to perform the action? Well, in that case, we're not going to be doing that every 10 minutes. We're only going to be acting every hour. So here's an instance where you want them to be different. Oftentimes, it's simple just to make them the same. The example I did previously where I'm only doing something every day, just keep them the same. Doesn't need to be complicated. But there are instances where you want to find things quickly, but only react on a slightly different, slower schedule. All right, we have about 15 minutes left. So if you have any last minute burning questions, now is the time to ask. While you do that, I'm going to go back to those pre-submitted questions. A question that came in is configuration expiration and product renewals. How do we create tickets or trigger emails for expiring product support when the service is not expiring yet? There is a short answer and a long answer to this one. The long answer I don't have time for, but I do want to call out. Scotty showed off our video library earlier. This is another topic where we have an entire video dedicated just to this process. And that's because we actually have a set of new features that came out relatively recently to make this process easier than it has been in the past. And that is this Renewals Made Easy webinar. It's going to be going over in depth how you can create and track a renewals process for your configurations and your assets. So if you want more answers than I'm about to give you right now, definitely check this out. It's a ton of very detailed information, as well as a good Q&A at the end where we had some questions live based on the topic. So now with that in mind, I'll give you the short answer, which is with a workflow rule again. Back to my set of tables, workflow rules. Now, some of you may be thinking, workflow rules for configurations, you guys have had that forever. And you're right. We've been able to track configurations that are expiring for quite a time. So let's say I want to be notified 60 days in advance about something that is expiring. In this case, I have it filtered down to a specific type. That's fine. This one I think is more generic. Yeah, this I'm looking for only configurations that are currently approved. So all my inactive configurations I don't care about. Good. I want to be notified 30 days before they expire. Also good. And here's one of those newer pieces of information I added. We've added the ability to flag specifically which configurations do and do not need renewal. And we added this based on partner feedback because just because an asset or license or whatever is expiring doesn't mean you plan on renewing it. Sometimes it's just useful to track when something is active and when it won't be in the future. So we've added this extra field to make it easier to track which specific assets or configurations will need to be renewed going forward. So here, this is a pretty simple workflow rule that's going to find everything I care about that I need to review going forward. Now, what do I want to do about that? That is going to be where my action comes in. In this case, I'm going to create an activity for someone to take an action. Activities are great for salespeople. If this is something that's going to require more effort on your team to actually look into and start this renewal process, you might want to create a separate renewals service board where you can create tickets to just kind of collect ticket records, essentially, of every single asset that's going to need to be reviewed. Then on maybe a monthly or bi-weekly basis, someone can go through, work through all the renewals that have come through on that board, close out those tickets, and then update the configurations with the new renewal information. All right. No more questions right now. That is fine. So in that case, I'm going to flip it over to a topic we had a couple questions on. I saved these for the last because they're not directly service delivery related, but obviously what we're delivering oftentimes is product that keep on hand. So I did have these ready, especially since we had a couple questions on it, and that is how do we track the procurement process and manage, or more specifically, how to find and archive old products, track inventory, use of bins versus warehouse, top reports, conduct inventory counts, and such. So, if to answer all of those questions, I'd have to dedicate an entire webinar. And fortunately for all of you, you guys already know where to find that webinar in our video library. But I'm happy to kind of give you a quick rundown and a short answer to this as well. First, on the inventory side of things, that will be tracked using specifically inventory class products. If you're new to tracking product in ConnectWise Manage, the most important thing you can learn are the product classes, which you can see right here. There are 5 product classes, and that dictates how Manage treats that product. Inventory class products are things that you keep on hand, which is most of what this question was around. So here's everything that my company currently tracks. So that's how you'll want to track that on hand, is using these inventory class products. And you can track the purchasing, receiving, shipping, all that good stuff through here. The inventory specific management functions used to be split out. We've recently combined them just to make it easier to track overall into this central inventory management screen. Here you can
Mitchie,
see,
we're still just seeing the slide deck.
you know what? I should probably move my screen. Here's what I wanted to be showing you. Thank you, Scotty.
All right.
I'm being honest, I am impressed I made it 75 minutes without making that mistake. I think that's a new record for me. Here I can see the products that I currently have on hand. If I need to make a transfer between warehouses, I can do that. This inventory adjustments right here, this is the tool you'll be using whenever you're conducting an inventory count of what you have on hand. If you find you're over or under anything, you can create an adjustment to fix that here. And to actually run through and do that count, we have in the procurement reports right here, the inventory count sheet. This is where you can go ahead, get a list of all of your on-hand counts of what you should have. And I can go ahead and see, okay, here's what I should have. And I go through my count and make sure that matches up. Once I've found my count where I'm over and under, I'd come back in and make my adjustment here in my inventory management screen on my inventory adjustments right here. Let's see. I think there's more to that question. Warehouses and bins. Warehouses are going to be representing the different locations where you store your product. These can be actual warehouses. These can be different offices. This could be a truck that holds inventory, wherever you keep different stuff. Bins are going to be subsections within that warehouse. This can be rows. This could be shelves. This could be specific closets within a building. Whatever you use to divide up your product and where it's stored, that's how you'll use bins and warehouses together. I apologize if you guys can hear my dog. He has a lot of opinions right now that he would like to share with everyone. All right, this one is a little complicated, so I saved it for last, and that is workflow rule ticket updates. Is there a way to have a workflow rule add a comment to a ticket? Right now, we're trying to use applying a ticket template, but whenever I apply a ticket template, that is overwriting the summary line, and we don't really want that. We want the summary line to be specific to the specific ticket that came in. Totally understand. This one, it doesn't seem like it's possible at first because there's no action that says update ticket on the workflow rule setup table. However, there is a trick we can do. So in my setup tables here, my workflow rules, let me go back and find a ticket one again. Let's say I wanted to add an update to the ticket for this on-call resource notification workflow rule. Well, in addition to assigning this resource, I want to add an additional action right here. And I'm actually going to be using the send email action type. And for this, we're going to be sending this email to a specific email address, and that is going to be my email connector. In this case, help@mycompany.com. And the reason we want to do this is we're going to have the workflow rule send emails into this email connector. And if I format the subject line the exact same way I do my closed loop emails and my status notifications, which is to have the ticket number SR number. If as long as I have this my subject line, if the email connector identifies this ticket number in the system, we'll go ahead and append this email to that existing ticket. This way, we can use our workflow rule to actually email in updates to the ticket itself. Now, this is going to be applying it into that general discussion tab, but this is at least a way to get that information in there. Whatever body information I want to type in here, I can parse specific information like always, and make sure that is updated in consistently. Is there an easy way to see when the last time a product was ordered? Is this going to be for, I think there's a couple different approaches we can use for this. Let me go ahead and show you the two that are coming to mind, and you can tell me if these are close to what you're looking for. One is a screen, and one's going to be a report. And are you talking about things you keep on hand or just product in general? Ooh, a couple people typing. Inventory. All right, so I have an inventory class product here. Let's see, when's the last time I ordered this Sony 50-inch television? Look in here. This references tab can tell me every single time this has been referenced. So it looks like I sold it once on ticket 602, and I purchased it on PO 59. And if I scroll over, I think I have a date on here. Do I not have a date? There we go, purchase date. And this was purchased on 9/16/2020. So if you just want to reference a specific product, this is the easiest way. Pop in here, check the references, and this will show you every sales order, every ticket, every purchase order, every project, every invoice that this product has popped up on. We also have some reports that will show you last time product was ordered. So products ordered for customer, by manufacturer, by vendor. This is good when you're looking for a list of stuff and you want to break it down by one of these three kind of filters. But if you just want to reference a single product, this references tab is the easiest way to go.
Hey, Mitch, sorry about that. So I just got tired of typing. So
That's fine.
really, we have like 500-600 items in the product catalog,
Hmm.
and I've used references before, and if you have a question about one product, it works great. But when
Yep.
you have 600 of them and you want to know which 10 of them you haven't ordered in a year and get them inactivated,
Mm.
that's really the question of just like, do we really need to keep all these in product catalog? So then I have staff that select things that maybe needed to be inactivated or we're now buying from a different vendor, or so I'm trying to figure out how to manage that so they don't select things I maybe don't want to buy order again.
Got it. So really, we're not looking for the last time a product was ordered. We're looking for products that we haven't ordered in X amount of days.
Yeah.
All right.
Or if it tells us a report that has all of it, then I can export it to Excel and take care of it there.
Yeah,
Just trying to see, are all of our products relevant still?
got it. So I don't see anything on this list view that would pull that out for me. Let me check one or two of our reports that I had pulled up. So let's say we wanted to see by the vendors we ordered from. I don't know how good the data is in my system, but let's go ahead and give it a try for our products for last year, see what we come up with. I'm also going to pull up the docs because I oftentimes have a good screenshot in here.
So that's what I was trying to find a report and I was unsuccessful.
Got it.
And then I went to Report Writer trying to access it, but then I had trouble finding the data that I wanted.
Yeah, that's the challenge with the report writer is it's great if you have a starting report you can build off of, but when you're coming from scratch, it's difficult to know which data sources to use and how to join them. So this is specific product ordered. Let me try another one. There we go. This one might be closer to what you're looking for. This is a list of specific products, and then the dates that each of them were sold on. So like this product was sold 3 times over the date range and so forth. So what this would miss is products that weren't sold at all over that date range. I don't think it's going to show include those 0 items. But at least this will give you kind of an idea of what you sold a lot or a little of over a specific time period. In this case, everything over the last year. So if you're doing this semi-regularly, you wouldn't need to worry about those things that haven't been sold in years, since you've been doing it on a semi-regular basis. Yeah, I'd say this is probably the closest report we have for what you're looking for. All right, we have a couple minutes left, so get your last minute questions in. And while we wrap up, I do want to thank you all for joining today, both for setting your questions in ahead of time and for asking questions live. It makes it more interesting for us. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll be doing more of these in the months to come, so we hope to have you back to answer any other questions you have about our ConnectWise products.
Hey, Mitchie, can I go back to the question I had earlier for the network probe stuff?
Absolutely.
Let me attempt to share my screen. Okay, I know that Joshua had said specifically certain types of firewalls, and I wanted to kind of take you down a real quick rabbit hole for this last minute we have left to show you how I would try to solve for this. So in the control center here, I'm going to automation templates and then probe templates. Now this is all supposing that I've set up a network probe and the firewalls in question are within the subnet that the probe was able to detect.
We
So
have
then,
that set up, yep.
yeah, good. So here in my library, in the probe, under probe templates, firewall devices, I've got Sophos. So I'll just click on this bad boy right here. So this is where a probe has found a device that, according to this detection template, it appears to be a Sophos firewall. So when that's the case, when we've detected that, then I've got a collection template here. So on a collection template, what I could do is I could make a new collection template rule. And on my rule, I could say, all right, I want to take specific action. So let me see. All right, I don't have one here. Do I have one here? Okay. So give me a second. I'm going to now go up here and click on my little, nope. I've toggled over to the collection templates tab now, so I can add a collection template. I'm going to apply it to my Sophos firewall. And this is the way that is sort of the easiest, most scalable way to capture the piece of information you need using the probe. So now that I've created a new collection template that's being applied to Sophos firewalls, I'm going to add a new template rule. And this will be whatever I want to call it for retrieving my Sophos OID value. I'm changing my rule type to retrieve an OID. Now right here, for this monitor alerts disabled, I click on the drop down and I'm going to change it to something else. I'll just say once a day. Once I did that, I now have a new monitor tab over here. All right. So we're going to say, what do I want? What am I looking for? So on the OID that I'm monitoring for these Sophos devices, I want it to be, less than 5,000. Whatever that value is, whatever is coming in that OID, I'm saying I want to look in this OID, I want to evaluate it, I'm looking for this, and then I want it to do something. If I see a value outside of that, we'll just say create an automate ticket. Now, give me just a second. We need it to look at this OID. So now this is where I'm plugging in whatever my OID value is, blah, 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 blah. I give it a name. So now I've told it, retrieve it, monitor it once a day. If the value is less than this, we're going to create a ticket, and I click OK. Well, all right. It wants my OID value. So give me a second. Well, I have my OID value in here. Please enter and name for the rule. So now this is only looking at whatever devices I've specified here, and those are falling into this library. So I've specified Sophos firewall. So I'm assuming now, right, that I've looked up an OID that I know is specific to this particular type of device. And so now I've created a monitor, and this is the easiest way to monitor for one particular OID for any Sophos firewall that any of my probes detect. I can go make a one-off SNMP probe, but that's cumbersome because I got to do it individually for each individual Sophos firewall. By doing it this way, here in the probe template, we're going to detect through my detection templates, okay, you are a Sophos firewall. So that is automatically detected. Now by having a collection template that says, apply it to my Sophos devices, we're doing it in a scalable way. Any Sophos firewall that is detected as being such by my detection template, now it's being collected, and that monitor I applied inside that collection template will get applied to any Sophos firewall we detect by any probe now and going forward. So this is the most scalable way to do it. By the way, when you make a monitor like this, you can't see it in the monitors screen. You can only see it inside this collection template rule that I got to here.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I look forward to reviewing the session with my colleagues and getting these rolled out. It's wonderful.
Excellent.
And I hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.